I am a recovering work addict, so I was clinically diagnosed with a work addiction. For me, it looked like having really intense bouts of insomnia, having a message on repeat in my mind telling me I wasn't good enough, I wasn't worthy enough, I wasn't doing enough, and never feeling good enough.
Welcome to Distinctly You, where we talk to women who have redefined success at different seasons of change. Today, we'll be talking with MaryBeth Hyland, who lives life based on her core values. What led her down this path? How is she using this lifestyle to live a fulfilled life while making an impact in the lives of others? Well, let's get into the conversation. Hello, MaryBeth, and welcome to Distinctly You. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
I know. I love this time together.
We've known each other for a few years now, but the way we met was truly special, to be honest. I remember you had a post on LinkedIn that absolutely resonated with me, and I said to myself, I need to know this woman. And I remember reaching out to you, and you were just so gracious, and I truly felt like I was talking to a kindred spirit. We were so like-minded, and we've worked together for a few years now, and you've become a friend. And so you are an author. You are a transformational coach, coaching practice that you have with your dear husband, James. And, you are just an all-round phenomenal woman. And I know I'm not doing justice, but I would love for you to have the opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience in the way that you would like to be seen and known.
Oh, thank you, Sherifah. Well, I know that you already know this, but I'll say it anyway. The feeling was mutual from the beginning. It was just an instant divine connection and a knowing that there was something bigger for both of us in knowing each other, and seeing what was possible when we came together. So thank you for that. It feels like it was just the other day, but it was like, I think it was probably like 2019. It was right before the pandemic. So anyway, wonderful to be here. And yeah, so an intro to me. There's so many directions to take this, but I will say that I am a recovering work addict. So I was clinically diagnosed with a work addiction when I think I was 27 years old. And a lot of people, when you hear that, they think, well, what's a work addiction? Isn't that like what you do to pay your bills and survive? And to just give a little bit of color around that, for me, it looked like having really intense bouts of insomnia, having a message on repeat in my mind telling me I wasn't good enough, I wasn't worthy enough, I wasn't doing enough. And so it really supercharged me into this mode of working around the clock 7 days a week and never feeling good enough. Like, it didn't matter how many awards, how many promotions, how I was being recognized, it still wasn't enough. And so my journey began, in even getting into any of the work that I do now, from that place of true disconnect between what people saw on the outside and what I was feeling on the inside, because everybody thought I had like this amazing life that was picture perfect and all those things, and had no idea that I was suffering so deeply on the inside. And that was when my healing journey began. And so I started to go to mindfulness based psychodynamic therapy, and that evolved into a whole different bunch of modalities, a whole different bunch of healing, and going into aspects of spirituality that were a big part of my healing process that I never knew were a part of me, because I was just so fogged up with this like feeling of not being good enough, that finally, when those started to shed those layers of self-hate, it brought me to a place that I realized that this is something a lot of people can actually relate to, right? And this all came, that deep judgment story inside of me came from being raised in a very traumatic experience with an abusive father. And so I just like took on that voice of not being good enough, and I let it be the fuel, like the fear-based fuel to succeed. And I know so many people can relate to that in their own version. And so when I stepped out and started my own business almost 9 years ago, which is wild to think it's almost been a decade now, it was really on that foundation of knowing that there are so many people who are striving and hustling and grinding and working themselves to the bone for this picture of success that was actually never really theirs. It
Mm.
was what they were told they should care about.
Wow.
And so now I help people and organizations to understand, how can you uncover your authentic core values, who you are at the core as individuals and as a collective community, and how can you start to align your behaviors with those values so that you feel purpose, so you feel energized, so you feel a sense of aliveness and alignment. And I'm really grateful to say I've been doing that in my own life alongside this business and work for almost a decade now. And I'm talking to you right now from Baltimore City, where we originally connected, but I live between here in a row home in the heart of downtown Baltimore, to a 200 square foot tiny home off the grid on a 100-acre ranch. No cell, no internet reception, like totally disconnected. Would have been my worst nightmare when I was at the peak of my work addiction, because it's like you can't connect in that way. And now it's become my safe haven. And my husband and I are on a quest to become homesteaders out there. And I'm living out my cowgirl dreams and learning how to build a business alongside that too.
Mm.
So I'd say that's my intro for for today.
No, I love that. And what I love about what you just said really is the fact that, the summation of who you are, every aspect of who you are, from how you grew up, how you were raised, to the emotions, the feelings that you were experiencing, and just some of the trauma that you had experienced, you brought it to bear in what you do now. So you allowed your experience to truly lead you in terms of your life's journey right now, in terms of what you do to help serve others. And I think that's a really great place to start, because I recently wrote an article, I think on LinkedIn, and the title was called, "What Do You Have in Your Hand?" There's a lot of women, and not just women, a lot of people in general, who keep seeking out, like, what's my life's purpose? What am I here on this earth to do? And they think about, like, okay, what skills do I have? Or, what interests me? But I think the bigger question is, who are you? And what have been your life's experiences? And what do you technically have in your hand in terms of the things that you do or experience every day that you can't take for granted, because maybe someone else needs to learn from that. Maybe whatever you've overcome is what you can help others overcome. So that's such a great place to start. And I love hearing that that's kind of like what you're kind of doing now in that sense. So you're living it, you're not just talking it. So that's
Wow.
beautiful.
Thank you. And I totally agree with that, Sharifah. One of the things I would continue on that wavelength of what you were just talking about is that oftentimes the things that we have in our hand, what you just described, we don't see them as gifts. We see them as burdens. So, like, my super sensitivity, like hypersensitivity, was always a burden, always a burden. It was always something that I was made fun of about. I had like all the friends all the time because everybody wanted to tell me all their things. So, even though that's a lovely thing, it was also like I was carrying that because I didn't have boundaries growing up and I didn't know how to ask for something instead of just being the one who was willing to receive everybody else's stuff. And I think that now, after going on an intentional healing journey, after doing a lot of the work that you're talking about, of understanding really who you are, how you got to that place, what your values are, what gives you a sense of purpose, it was in the things that I used to want to shut down or pretend weren't real or hide or hope nobody found out about me, that were actually the greatest gifts and were the most power and the biggest opportunities to have a depth of connection from the beginning with somebody when you choose to go that way. And I know that was how we connected so deeply, right? It was like when you share yourself vulnerably, the truth about your experience in a way that makes sense, right? I'm not going to like air out all of the things that happened to me, like for no apparent reason to just put out there, right? But in a way that's constructive, in a way that's cathartic, in a way that's even therapeutic,
Mhm.
it creates that same kind of energy for other people. And they want to be a part of the journey with you.
I totally agree. One aspect of who you are that I didn't mention earlier is the fact that you're also a phenomenal speaker. I have actually heard you speak. And so, anyone listening, I'm sure, to what you're hearing now, you can just hear how amazing she is in terms of all the things that Mary Beth says. But I do want to, just hone in a little bit in terms of how you define success. And the reason I want to ask that is because, a lot of what we talk about on this channel is how women have redefined success at different seasons in their life. So as we live life, we evolve. Who we are today is not who we were even 2, 3 years ago. We just continue to evolve. And so I'm sure your definition of what success is today is definitely different from what it was 5, 10 years ago.
Oh yeah. 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 And it kind of connects back to the beginning of this conversation of like my definition of success for a very long time was based on what my parents and what society at large deemed successful. So that was things like titles, salary, where you're living, what kind of like material things that you have, what kind of experiences that you're having, like vacations and stuff like that. It was very much about the visual, right? Like the public image. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed going on those trips. I liked having a good income. Those all they're not bad things. Those are wonderful things. It's just when those are the measure of success, but they're actually not in alignment with your core values, that is when the disconnect starts to happen. So the reason I was so burnt out and overwhelmed and in a toxic cycle of work addiction was because I was pushing myself so hard for somebody else's values. Whereas now, today, in this season of my life, one of the greatest measures of success is whether or not I've lived in alignment with my values, right? I consider it values driven success. So for me, that looks a lot different than you or anybody else because I'm a unique individual. So, like some of the things I think about in that list of, title, salary, right? I think about like, do I have peace of mind? Do I feel loved and am I loving? Am I connecting with nature? Right? Like those to me are the biggest measures of success of all time. Like, do I love myself? Like, that's so hard. It seems like something that we could be like, of course I love myself, right? But especially when you come from a trauma background, which most people have pretty significant trauma, let alone like we all have some form of trauma, right? And when you're raised in a trauma environment like that, it's really easy to believe that it's motivating to be hard on yourself, to be mean to yourself is a motivation because that's what you were taught. Like, being called names or being told if you don't do this, then you can't have that. Like, not in a constructive way of setting boundaries with your kid, but like a toxic way of controlling. Um, it was an experience where I really didn't think it was possible for me to just tune into myself to see what success meant. And today I'm like, wow, the fact that I know how to take care of myself in my mind when I get into a spiral of self-hate and unworthiness is such an ultimate measure of success. It is
Wow.
huge.
Wow. As you say that, I think given even myself, and I know a few other people I've spoken with have said this, but just like you said, a lot of times success has been more outwardly in terms of, okay, I need to stay busy. I need to do this. I need to take on this assignment. I need to take this. And before you know it, you start kind of getting burnt out, right?
Yeah.
And I always cite something you have told me personally, which is be kind to yourself. It is something I cite a lot. And I'm always like, when I find myself in that flow and motion of just go, 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 sometimes I pause and I'm like, why? You know,
According to who, right?
according to who, right? If I'm not feeling it, then I don't have to do it because, you know, who's putting pressure on me to say I have to do that, you know? And so a lot of times I also find that we stay busy almost to maybe the silence tune out the silence of having maybe the perspective of truly being in sync with what are truly our core values, what is truly important to us, because we're staying so busy, we don't even have time to really be quiet and listen and just be at peace with ourselves. So, my question to you is, what would be your advice for other recovering workaholics and other folks who are always in that tangent of being busy, 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 because that is something personally that I am trying to recover from because I do love to do a lot of different things,
Yeah, and
like a
that's
lot of
good.
people do, which is great. But it's
Yeah.
also important, like you said, to make sure that those things are aligned with your core values so that you are at peace
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
burnt out, right? And you are fulfilled and not fulfilled because of what others say, but because of what aligns with yourself. So,
How it feels
how can people
inside.
start? Yeah. Yeah. So, how can people start who have not yet made that connection?
Yeah. One of the simplest exercises that I know you've done many times, we've done this many times together, Sherifah, where that I don't think that people always realize how simple it can be, is making a drain and fill list. So it's exactly what it sounds like. Drain is anything that's taking energy away from you, meaning you feel less energy, right? Like you just got sucked dry, maybe even. And then a fill are things that give you energy, fills you up, makes you feel that sense of aliveness. And so you can decide if you want to look at one aspect of your life. So if it was like you specifically want to look at your work, you could just do a drain fill for your work. But if you want to look at life overall, you could do that too. And I encourage you to not just look at the tangible things like, going to the gym, whether you did that or not, but also things that maybe feel a little intangible, like the way I talk to myself, right? Like those are things that can fill you up or can drain you. So I'd encourage you to look at whatever aspects of your life you want to focus on right now. Make a big list, make a laundry list. And now here's the thing, there are some things that probably fall in the middle that fill you up and can be draining, right? So we were just talking about all the travel that you've been on, this like global globe trotting adventure. It's like super filling, right? Super energizing, but can also be draining to take on that much. And so you can put some things in the middle. And then this is the bonus. Like if you want to take it to the next step, then figure out why that thing is filling or draining, right? So if you said like going to the gym, using the example I used earlier, if that's filling you, if that's something that fills you up, what about it fills you up? Is it the people that are there? Is it the actual act of exercising? Is it a sense of community? And so the bonus step is to actually then connect your values, AKA why that feels good or doesn't feel good, to your drains and your fills, because here's where it all comes together. When you're being filled, it's because your values are alive. And when you're being drained, it's because your values are being violated. And that can feel like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. I have no idea what my values are. And I'm so happy that we now have a free quiz that anybody can take 24/7. It's just corevaluesquiz.com. And you can get your values profile and use that as a reference for yourself when you do the drain fill, that you can go back and say, oh, I didn't realize there's this theme that all the things that are filling me up are because I feel like I can activate my authenticity in those spaces or in those experiences or with those people or whatever it is. So you'll start to notice trends, you'll start to notice some themes, and you'll probably start to notice the same on the drains, right? Of like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the inner harmony was so lacking. And that's why I feel so drained. So now how can I do something about that information that I just found out about myself? What is the first baby step to be kind, right? To be compassionate, to give yourself permission to be human? In what's one boundary I could set? Just one, just a little one, just a little tiny baby one. It doesn't have to be like totally change your entire life. It could if you have the energy for that. But if it's just one little step of, okay, well, I get really energized when I go to the gym, maybe I'm going to prioritize that more often so I feel that energy regularly.
I really like that, and I also feel like, especially using that gym analogy, you can also flip that too, whereby once you know your why and once you know your values around why going to the gym is important to you and why it fills you up, you also have those moments where maybe you don't feel like going to the gym. You know what I mean? And you're just like, ugh, I don't feel like going today. But then when you can go back and look at, but here are the reasons why I've always loved going to the gym. Here are the reasons why it's important to me. You know what I mean? And be able
Yeah.
to kind of go back through that and be able to say, "Oh, okay." You know what I mean? This is why maybe I need to take it back up again, or this is why I need to get back into it again, but also still at the same time acknowledging the fact that if you're tired and you just don't feel like going, like you said, based on your book, Permission to be Human,
Yes.
you don't have to push yourself
No, because
beyond
then
your
you won't like it anymore, right? If it
exactly.
starts to be something that you keep shoulding yourself, I should do it, I have to do it, I must do it. If it changes to that from like, I want to do it, I get to do it, I'm excited to do it, that's when you start to get out of alignment with your own energy and it becomes a forced experience versus meeting yourself where you are, not where you want to be, and taking that first baby step. I mean, even just in something like that, it's like, well, I don't have the energy to go to the gym. Okay, well, maybe there's something you can do at home that would be meeting you where you are. And maybe that's like 1 minute of meditating. And that's like the gym for your mind that day. Right. And so you can always calibrate, like, what does 100% look like today? It's different every single day. So to not judge yourself on what you did in the past or what you think you're going to do in the future, but like, what does 100% look like today? And I'll be honest with you, Sherifah, like I was super drained this morning and I knew we had this coming up and I had a whole list of things to do this morning. And I was like, nope. One of my top core values is inner harmony. I'm going to rest. I'm going to rejuvenate. I'm going to push everything else on pause for this morning so that I can feel like I'm in a good energy and I'm in a good space to be fully present in this conversation. And I'm so glad that I did. But old MaryBeth, work addicted MaryBeth would have been like, you loser. I can't believe you couldn't get work done. Like, what a waste of a morning. Versus now, it's like, I'm so proud of you, girl. Like, you're living your values. Keep checking that off and like tuning in with what your heart and your spirit and your energy is telling you. Like, you're doing good work. And that's not a short distance from one to the other. That's a journey, that's a journey to alignment. And it's something to be really proud of when you can catch yourself in a place where you'd normally be judgmental and critical for not doing what you should do and move into compassion and self-love for, well, I get to rest today. And I'm so proud of myself for choosing that.
I really like that you said that because, a lot of us, especially as women, we are so hard on ourselves. I mean, when you talk about what we say to ourselves on a constant basis, a lot of times we accept from ourselves things that we would never allow anyone else to say to us. But yet we think it's okay to say it to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so just talk to me a little bit more about like tips that people can use to mitigate some of those negative self-talk that we're always constantly rotating in our mind, and that can be really draining, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a couple tips. One is going to be really like meeting yourself where you are. If you have, this is so brand new. If you're listening right now and this is like a completely new idea and it's like, whoa, I have no idea how to stop doing that and make a new choice. Well, the first tip is just notice. Just notice. That's what mindfulness is. It's investigating the present moment with all of your senses. And so if you can just notice, if you're talking to yourself in a mean voice, I just gave some examples of like, I can't believe you. You're so lazy. This is like, what a waste of a morning. That would be a great example of negative self-talk that you could just notice and say, what is happening in my body when I talk to myself that way, right? Like, what am I feeling tension in my neck, or is my heart beating a little bit faster? Am I having sweaty armpits or palms? Just noticing, like from a place of curiosity. That is the most powerful first step you can ever take, because it starts the process of separating you from that just being the truth, right? We're programmed to believe that what we're telling ourselves is true. Like if I tell myself I'm a loser, that means it's real. Like I'm validating it's true by the way I'm talking to myself. But as soon as you can start to say, like this is the thought of I'm a loser, and you can say, oh, well, what is it about that thought that's going on in my body? What is going on? What am I telling myself? And maybe even ask, like, where did that come from? Who was the first person who ever talked to me that way? And to just get curious about that begins the process of separating from that being the truth to you being mindful and observing yourself. And then from there, it's about one of the best things I've learned recently. It's like, forgive yourself for having those thoughts. Like, lots of times it's about moving past and just getting to the next place. But if you can forgive yourself and say, I know that I have been telling myself that I'm a loser for so long, and I forgive myself for that. Like, I forgive me. It's okay. And now I'm going to make another new choice. That's the next step. What's the next choice? And the next choice could be, well, what would I tell my best friend? Kind of like you were just talking about a moment ago. Like, we wouldn't talk to our best friends the way that we talk to ourselves. So could you be your best friend? What might that sound like? And so instead of having you're a loser, maybe meeting yourself where you are is, I'm so grateful that I'm a work in progress. I'm so proud that I'm learning how to have a better relationship with myself. What a gift to be able to be aware. So it doesn't have to be the total opposite side of like, I'm the best, right? From like, I'm a loser to I'm the best, but like meeting yourself where you are, you can absolutely say like, I'm amazing. I'm incredible. I am somebody who's worthy of everything, all of the love that exists. You can absolutely go there, but keep meeting yourself where you are so that it doesn't feel like BS. Sometimes that's like fake it till you make it. There's a certain degree of that will serve you versus will feel like imposter syndrome. So figure out what's right for you, and really first the observing. And I have another tip, but I want to stop before I go into that.
Well, I really like that. In fact, for me, one of the things that I myself do, and I've spoken about previously before, is I also, like you said, once you observe a train of thought in terms of how I talk to myself, I also now, because I'm aware, I actually write down the response that I have for that thought, the positive response that I have for that thought. So I already have prepared and I've written down, I've noted that this is my response for this negative reoccurring thought that isn't true. And so that way, when I have a thought that doesn't serve me, I have a comeback for that thought that is quick, that is instantaneous, because I've been intentional about fleshing out what that response is going to be, being prepared for it. Because let's be honest, a lot of these thoughts, especially that don't serve us, tend to be recurring. It's not always new. And so, like you said, when you're mindful and you're aware that, you get what I'm saying? Whenever I'm facing XYZ, I always notice I have this kind of thought. Well, here's my response for that. Here's my comeback for that. And so being intentional about that is something that works for me. And it might be something I've written down, or in my case, it might be a scripture in the Bible that I hold near and dear, and I will speak that scripture to myself. You know what I mean? And so that has been my way of being able to deal with that, because we all go through that, you know.
The programming and the wiring that we have inside of us is pretty much determined by the time we're 8, of like what are going to be these continuing stories and patterns of how we talk to ourselves and the things that we believe are real and true based on the way that we were domesticated. And so to reprogram that, it's like, okay, I've been doing it this way for 30 years. And now here I am. I'm about to turn 40. Like, it's been 10 years really of doing this work deeply. It's an experience of, well, I can give myself grace too, because I've only actively been doing this for 10 years. Compare that to the other 30 behind me. It's a lot smaller time. And so when you have tools like the how to respond to yourself and how to give yourself permission to be human, more grace and compassion, you recognize that the difference over time is that it's not you don't have those thoughts at all. I don't even consider that a goal. I don't think that's a realistic goal. It's that you know what to do with them, right? It's that you know how to have a relationship with them. You know how to put them to rest. You know how to get into a place of equilibrium within yourself, so that time, the elasticity of that is a very short. So now, like, something in the past might have taken me out for a week, 2 weeks of just constant telling myself what a loser I am. Now it's maybe, a few minutes, maybe an hour at most. And so that's the difference, is just having that strength, that inner, building those inner muscles of the rewiring, the reprogramming that takes time, and it's an investment of time. But gosh, if the outcome isn't worth it. I know you know this, Sherifah. Like,
Mhm.
it is so worth it to do that work, because what happens when you're truly practicing it in your own life, you not only get to have a better life for yourself, but everybody around you gets to have a better life, because you're no longer functioning from a place of reactivity and triggers on a regular basis. You're functioning from a place of being grounded, aligned, and having energy that people want to be around. And so just your presence is a healing presence without even having to open your mouth. And that's what happens when you choose to do the inner work.
So we've been citing and talking and just kind of skimming a little bit around really the title of your book, Permission to Be Human. Just share with us a little bit what the book is about and why you wrote it.
Yeah. I wrote Permission to Be Human during the pandemic, because I knew that this was something that I wanted more people to have access to, from a place of giving people a step-by-step guide on how to create a values-driven culture, specifically at work. And so I had been doing workplace culture consulting for, I don't know, maybe 7 years at that time as the core of my business. Um, and I had worked with all different types of organizations, all different sectors. And there was this commonality, it didn't matter what kind of organization you were, or what your services were about, who your clients were. It always came back to the humans and the human experience at work. And almost always, when there was a discord or a disconnect, it was because people weren't aligned with their values. They weren't being led by their values. They weren't being cultivated through their values. They weren't being nurtured through their values. And oftentimes it was because an organization would claim to have certain values and then behave completely differently. And so they just didn't have any weight. It didn't really matter. And so, having done this work, like, truly for like years and years and years, working usually with companies for about 3 years on doing these initiatives, I just wanted to be able to hand over a guide to anybody who wanted to do this, whether it's a workplace of just them, like a solopreneur, right? Who wants to have a values driven experience at work, wants to create values driven success. Or if it was somebody who was like in charge of this, or in charge of a team, or maybe even part of a community that they were leading, where they're like, I know that these values matter, but I don't know what you actually do with that, right? People always say values matter. There's very few people who are going to tell you they don't matter. But even fewer people actually know what to do when it comes to operationalizing their values. So I wanted to make that really simple. Actually I have a copy of it right here.
Yes, I have
Um,
my own coffee actually,
oh,
in
I
my
love it.
bookshelf. Yes, thank you for sharing that. In fact, I think that's one of the ways we first connected too, and it's definitely a good read for any leader, for any entrepreneur out there who is definitely looking to align their core values to the work that they do. So it's a good one. So before we wrap up today, Mary Beth, is there anything that you may want to share that I haven't asked you about? And how can people reach you?
Yeah, the best way for people to reach me is if you want to reach me like on a personal level, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active there. This is how I met Sherifah, how we got connected. So please do that. You can check out my website is sparkvisionnow.com and my speaking page is marybethspeaks.com. That's a wonderful way if you want to continue the conversation or get connected more deeply. Any of those places are great. And one other thing I want people to know. So I the thing that like is like coming to my heart, the heart flare that I'm having right now is to just share a little story recently. And I share this story because my intention is to inspire other people to remember that if it feels like it's not working out in the first try, that something better is on its way. And when you choose that mindset, just you can be open to so much abundance and possibility. So I mentioned that I'm turning 40 this year. I'm turning 40 in September. And so I was like, the last couple of years have been really rough on a personal note. And I really wanted to celebrate being alive. I wanted to do something to celebrate this milestone birthday. And so I happened to see somebody who on LinkedIn who is my friend professionally that way. I don't know her deeply in a personal way, but she was doing a retreat in Bali, a women's retreat. And I was like, perfect. This is exactly what I'm going to do. It was a couple weeks after my birthday. I was like, this is divine. I'm so grateful. I went to put my deposit down and the retreat got canceled. And I went into like victimhood mode, like straight up, like, of course it can't cancel, of course this is happening to me. Nothing can be easy. Here I want to celebrate life. And now this is, the whole, what we do, right? Like we were just talking about being mean to yourself. This is also victimhood is a part of that. So I was really choosing the victimhood story. And then my husband said, what if you're being protected and you weren't supposed to go there and something else was on its way? And so I decided that since this year, my word of the year is power, I was like, all right, I was just like spewing that everywhere. What if I take my power back? Instead of going out and chasing after something, I can actually just sit and be still and see what comes my way. And a week later, a woman who I ran a retreat with in the fall, she reached out to me and she sent me a text and she said, hey, if I could do this, I would in a heartbeat. I thought this was something you'd be interested in. And long story short, I'm now going to be in Montana for 24 days, the longest I've ever gone anywhere in this kind of an experience. I'm going to be learning how to gentle wild Mustangs with two women who are completely aligned with my values. I had no idea this was something that I could do. I am a cowgirl and I ride horses and work with horses in a lot of different capacities. And so I just didn't think this was something that I could have access to. And so here I am, something better, way better. And not to say that Bali wouldn't have been amazing, just a very different type of experience. I'm going to be a different human being as a result of these 24 days. So that's just a little nugget to remember that, like, if not this, then something better is always on the way.
I love that. And that is such a great and positive note to end on. And thank you so much, Mary Beth, for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule, but to just take that time out to chat with us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's such a gift.
You're a gift, my dear.